In 2015, I was going to kill myself. The reason I was going to do that was because of the Royal Commission into Child Sexual Abuse, which made me face what happened to me as a 10-year-old child. I wasn't ready to face it, but I was forced to. I made a decision not to kill myself, and that was only by the grace of God, placing a photo in my mind of my crying uncle who was responsible for coordinating the rescue effort of the Kempsey bus crash 30 years ago this year. After I got out of hospital, I sought counselling assistance. And that gentleman suggested that I get a dog to help me on this journey of recovery. That journey's been an interesting one. On the 1st of November 2015, I got Chelsea Dog, my beautiful girl, who has given me a reason to get out of bed every day, but she's also saved my life. In 2016, Chelsea and I walked 500 kilometres from Kempsey on the mid-north coast to Parliament House in Sydney. I had to go to Sydney for a medico-legal appointment, and my vehicle broke down. I couldn't get Chelsea on a train or a bus because she wasn't recognised as a service dog. All the bus companies and the transport companies in Kempsey that I know, again because of legalities, couldn't give me a lift down. So the Scottish side of me and the Irish part of me rose up, and I said, well, bugger it, I'll walk, but I'll walk for a cause. So in 30 days, Chelsea and I walked from Kempsey to Sydney. We met some amazing people along the way, heard some amazing stories. We left on Valentine's Day 2016 because we wanted people to understand that we love them, victims of crime and sexual abuse, and that love doesn't come in a box of chocolates, but it comes from a heart. So when we arrived in Parliament House, we were greeted by David Shoebridge from the Greens and hosted by him for 6 hours. We met with 4 members of the Labor Party and the Christian Democrats. At the end of that, we were invited to a rugby union game in the Sutherland Shire. And at that game, there was a man sitting in the stand wearing a baseball cap and having a beer and just trying to enjoy the day, but people kept patting him on the back. And I asked the president of the club who that was, and he said that it was Scott Morrison. So as the game finished, I timed my exit to meet with his exit, and I asked him if he would pat Chelsea, and he did, and I said, Mr. Morrison, will you pat Chelsea when we make it to Canberra? And hence we are here in Canberra, many years later, and that 3 years was a very dark period for me. And if it wasn't for Chelsea, there were some days that I wouldn't have got out of bed. But this is the key that I learnt of why my counsellor suggested I have Chelsea, is because during the day I had to take my eyes off myself, and depression and PTSD can be very selfish. PTSD is much more complex than that, but the depression part of PTSD is so self-focused and so inward-looking. But Chelsea gave me a reason to get out of bed every day. I had to walk her, I had to feed her. I had to care for her, so it enabled me to take my eyes off myself. And it made me go to a place called Woolworths because I had to buy dog food and I didn't want to be around people. I would have been quite happy to be inside my bus and just live a very reclusive lifestyle. But because I had Chelsea, I couldn't do that. And that's the key from my perspective. Our journey's been very varied. In September last year, I had a blood clot break off from my leg and go through my heart into my lungs. That happened on a Friday afternoon. I didn't have anyone to look after Chelsea, so I hung in there till Monday morning when I knew the boys would be in to pick up their trucks and go out for the day. We were trucks sitting a yard at that time doing security. And I got myself out to the front and I was dragging my leg. I couldn't even walk properly. And I couldn't breathe properly. And I said to Chelsea, tell him, and that's her command. Chelsea, who's that? Who's that? Tell him. Just like that. But she went crazy. And one of the blokes got out of his car and he said, what's wrong? And I said, ambulance, and collapsed. And half an hour later, I was in an ambulance on the way to hospital. And Chelsea tried 3 times to get in that ambulance and come with me. When I got to hospital, I wasn't coping. I lived for those 3 years like a scared 10-year-old little boy that had been molested, whose life, his dignity, any respect for authority had been eroded by what this man had done to me. And in hospital I wasn't coping, and I met an angel in a nurse's uniform. And she said to me, Andrew, what can we do to help you through this? I said, I need my dog. And she said, you bring Chelsea in tomorrow. You get a mate to bring her in and she can come in. Well, the next day the doctor arrived when Chelsea arrived, and I said to the doctor he'd have to wait because my dog was there. And the staff convinced me to do it the other way around. But when she came down the stairs, she was confused. She knew she was there to see me, but she didn't know where I was. So I asked the doctor if I could just welcome her, and he said, yeah, sure. And when he saw the interaction between Chelsea and I, his response was, how would you like to go home? Because we've started all the treatment that we can do here. You're now on tablets, so go home. And he said, there's 3 things I want you to do. 1 is take your medication, 2 is see your doctor, and 3 is let Chelsea love you. And the 3rd one was the easiest one. So we left hospital. And then a couple of weeks later, Chelsea got really sick. She had a double infection, a temperature of 40.2. So it cost $5,000 to get her right. Thank you, the government, for Medicare. Mine was free. Well, it actually cost the institution the $5,000. What? It's coming out of my settlement, neither here nor there. And when Chelsea got better, I made a promise to her that she would come to Canberra and she would meet Mr. Morrison again, and that she would get that pat. So we started a program. I had a sign made that said, PM ScoMo, I'm coming for my Pat Chelsea dog. And we took photos wherever we were, and we'd say, he's not here. And that led to Valentine's Day this year, 2019. And our journey took us all the way to the Prime Minister's office in Canberra. And a beautiful man who made a promise 3 years ago to pat my dog sat on the lounge, and not only did he allow her to pat him, he allowed her to kiss him. So Mr. Morrison, for that, I'm eternally grateful, and I thank you very much. But the picture's bigger than that. We have some areas in Australia that don't let registered service dogs into their institutions, whether it's a hospital, a doctor, restaurant, taxi cab. I've met some beautiful people along the way who have served our country and have service dogs because of the PTSD that they have as a result of serving in Afghanistan or other war-torn areas. Some Vietnam vets. One lady I know, and I haven't asked her permission, so I won't use her name, but she took her dog all the way to America, and her dog walked some trek over there that I can't remember the name of. But it cost her, she had to do GoFundMe to get her dog back into Australia because of the quarantine legislation. So we're asking in this country, this great country of Australia, where we have freedoms still, to adopt a policy like they do in America with the American Disabilities Act, whereby our service dogs here in Australia are recognised, and that there's a national approach, because currently it's a state-by-state approach and each state varies. So we'd like a national approach so that when we travel interstate to see relatives or families or just a holiday, that we can take our precious animals with us so that our quality of life can remain the same and consistent, and we don't have to worry about different legislation in different states. And we don't need that extra pressure in our life. We need to make life as simple as possible for people with complex PTSD, which I have. And I can talk mainly about myself because it's my story. I don't have the right to tell others' stories because they tell them much more powerfully than I do. But to increase the quality of life, when things are perpetrated upon us, victims of child sexual abuse, that we had no choice in. Wolves in sheep's clothing stole our innocence and affected our lives, and sometimes it's not for 40 years later that it starts to unravel and unpack, and then we can look back and see the challenges we've had in life. Like, I've had many jobs, and the authority of a boss, I had this block because of what happened to me by a person who my family entrusted with my education, and therefore I was to respect. I couldn't tell my family what happened to me. To this day, I now don't have a relationship with some members of my family because I've chosen to to get compensation. So in our striving just to live on a daily basis, our animals mean so much to us. So as you consider the bill that goes before Parliament, when it does, and it hits your desk, maybe you'll think back on this story and just have compassion for what our animals mean to us. Thank you for listening to our video and hearing our story. And if at any time that you would like to contact me and talk about this, sit down and have a cuppa. That'd be awesome. We have a Facebook page, Never Walking Alone. You can contact us through there, and it is Never Walking with an ING alone. Otherwise you'll get the Liverpool theme song and there'll be 3,000 pages that don't relate to us. But again, thank you for your time, and thank you for your service to our country.